I don't know if you've read any of the lyrics.
Oh, I have.
But there's another undertone, is the religious undertone, that the film doesn't really hit on too much. Because if you think about it, I mean, there's a big monster destroying the city. You know, as far as how does that coincide with religion? And I challenge you guys to go out and hear some of the lyrics to the soundtrack of this film. I wish I had them on me, but I don't. I really challenge you guys to just go on YouTube, look up the soundtrack, and some of the lyrics really speak to that. And in my opinion, in great form.
Absolutely, yeah. One of the lines in "Who Will Know," the Atomic Breath Scene song, says it's something like, "As long as I breathe, I stand a chance." And it's funny. It takes a interesting double meaning when you realize it's Godzilla thinking that. And so, as long as he breathes his atomic breath, he'll have a chance of fighting back, of living. So, yeah.
Uh-huh.
All right. Anybody questions, thoughts, differences of opinion? Yes.
Push it back to the audience.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I thought that theme music was used in the original as a kind of an upbeat, bring you positive when they showed a lot of army and all the mechanization of everything coming to fight Godzilla, and a positive feeling there. But in this one, they used the same theme. That wasn't kind of a military thing. That was just sort of an action thing when Godzilla was actually causing destruction.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Like twisted the usage of the music.
Oh yeah. Kind of like I guess remixing or reappropriating the Ifukube's action music from the original, and I think that reflects the new character of the film. It's a more, I would say, is there more action here? I think that's a huge debate right there. Whether this one's more action-packed than the original.
Yeah.
I think there's more going on, or at least because of the technology, the strides of technology. It seems like there's more going on.
Oh yeah. When Reggie was creating the trailer for this, for the custom Frida trailer, we had some back and forth.
Yep.
On the soundtrack that we wanted to use for, Reggie originally came up with the upbeat version, right? I think that might be the actual song that we're talking about. So it was a more upbeat. Everyone's getting together. We're gonna do something together and defeat the monster. Upbeat versus something more like the original. That's more of a different kind of a more deeper undertone.
Yeah. So called. Yeah, and I think that, but I think ultimately that reflects that strength of Godzilla I referred to in the intro, that like it kind of runs the spectrum, the emotional spectrum, from like really silly and heroic to like really dark and menacing, and that's reflected in the content of the films, but it's also reflected in the music, and that's like a huge legacy of music right there, from Ifukube's scores for the original, the early Showa films, and to Shangisu's films for this film, well, Shin Godzilla. So, yeah, there's a lot there.
Interesting.
Yes, this fine lady, yes, what can I do for you?
I just thought the movie was really fascinating because it's not a typical Godzilla movie. It was more focused on logistics, which you never would think would be a focus for a Godzilla movie. For half the entire film, the monster literally just walks forward, and all of the tension comes from, the over-dramatization of making decisions about what to do. So it's more like a heist movie, or even like a political drama. But they make it seem like over the top, like dramatic. Like when they're talking about people crossing the train stuff, and it's just two people, and they're like, oh, we can't move forward in attacking this thing because it's two people. But I thought that was an interesting side of it too, that does have a global kind of meaning, because the original was very focused on man's connection to the environment and what we were doing, and that was kind of disruptive when we were using nuclear weapons and things like that. And I feel like now, because we have environmental problems that are being artificially, not addressed because of artificially inflating how important it is to make choices or what to do, I think it is really relevant in the same way that the original was, but just in a very different way.
Yeah, absolutely, and it goes back to those similarities with the original, but also the differences, you know, I mean, and of course, I mean, this movie is not gonna be exactly like the original, but it's interesting to see how it plays on those themes and how it differs, just like the artistic choices, and the fact that how so much has changed between 1954 and 2016. Like, that's just an immeasurable amount of change that's happened in Japan and the world.
You know, a lot has changed, right? But has it though? Has it really? Because you think about 1954, the original Godzilla, and the challenges that they had, and the weapons that they had to combat Godzilla at that time, versus what we have now, or at least in this film. You know, it's very similar. You know, tanks, you know, helicopters, airplanes, and just missiles and shooting at it. You know, and then you have the frozen liquid that they use at the end, which would be, I think, the similar to the oxygen destroyer. Yeah, right from the original. So to me, it was interesting to see both films, the original and Shin Godzilla, and two different time periods, very different in time, space, but very similar in how they try to eliminate the threat. You know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the original, they used darkness. The monster was actually said to be angered by light and bright lights. So that gave him an excuse to only come out at night. And one of the reasons is cinematography. This one was exciting because they paid attention to every bullet, everything that was launched was shot. The large picture views were consistent with the close-ups, and everything there was a lot more detail in it. But in the original, they had the monster coming out at night, and it served a really good effect of they couldn't show the monster, and nobody really saw the monster completely. So they developed a lot more tension with that darkness aspect of it. They didn't have to be really good at the cinematography.
Yeah, absolutely. That, I mean, back in the day, the darkness was able to hide a lot of the things they just weren't able to get right with miniatures and lighting. But now, 2016, they are able to, to show, like, capture all that. So they can have Godzilla out in full force in broad daylight, charging through Kamada Ward, and firing his laser beam through his tail and spine dorsal fins. And it's funny, if I can return back to the idea that this member of the audience was talking about, the more realistic tone of the movie. It's interesting because some have, well, obviously Godzilla is probably classified as a science fiction film, but some have argued that just the tone and the approach or whatever, it makes it more like a fantasy, like they're fantasy films. So there's even a journal, film magazine called Japanese Fantasy Film Journal or whatever. Like that was a big Godzilla fan magazine back in the 60s and 70s. So, but this is like probably like if there were a giant monster to come and just destroy everything, this is how it would happen. And like even the way the military is deployed in this film, because a lot of the old films, it's just like they just send the military out and they're just there. Yeah, and they just bombard, like they're all hitting. There's no coordination or anything. They're driving the tanks, are driving right up in front of Godzilla and shooting at him or whatever. This film, it shows like there's thought to, there's strategy. That's something you don't really see in Godzilla movies. Like they have like waves and they deploy them like in each respective waves, and when they realize it's not working, they stop. They don't just keep going on and on. Yes.
One thing I liked about the film, I don't know if it's something that has to do with financial constraints or just a stylistic approach in Japan, is not an over-reliance on necessarily CGI. The fact that there's still miniatures being used, that there's set scenes. At some point it's a guy in a suit there. And the fact that you can meld the two where at least in American cinema, or most cinema now, because CGI is cheap, it's just gotten to the point where you don't need a guy in a suit. That's probably going to cost more. The fact that they stuck with that as kind of hybrid form of shooting the film. I thought that was really interesting, and I think it gave it that more realistic tone. It has a different feel to the film because you're not just looking at like a green screen or anything like that. You actually get like a tactile feel from like the miniatures, the sets at different stages of the film.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to Toho for making it happen that way. And that's sort of, that's something, going back to the casual viewer, I was even gonna ask you, we're back to, I was thinking, I don't know if, I wasn't sure if it was all CGI or not. I was gonna ask if, what parts were CGI and what parts were not, but, I guess that does sort of answer my question that, there were some miniatures being used, and at some point there was a guy in a suit, which is, it's pretty cool, yeah.
Yeah, that was a pretty big, a bold decision on Toho's part. So there was this was the first Japanese Godzilla film to use CGI to depict him, but I think it really works here. And then I like the fact they brought up there are still miniatures in there, and it really helps the film's presentation because there's still that element of practical effects that really characterizes Godzilla. And on that note, it's interesting because although Godzilla is CGI, they used motion capture to help render him. So they had an actor provide the movement and they animated over it. So in a way, the old summation of the classic films made its way into this take on the character. Yes.
Wondering what your guys' interpretation is of the last shots of the movie of the human skeleton sort of mutated into the tail.
Yeah, what was that?
Well, I mean, to me, that was probably one of the most exciting parts, because then it lets one's own imagination, think of where it's going next. When I first saw the film, I was a bit disappointed to find out later once I did some research, to know that there wasn't a sequel coming out right away. Part of that, from my understanding, is that there was some kind of a deal between Toho and Legendary to where they weren't going to make a sequel to coincide with the American versions. But that's, I believe, up until Kong versus Godzilla, or is it Godzilla versus Kong? I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
But after that, they may make a sequel, to my understanding, to go more into that. But I would think that's just the next phase. The way I took it was that Godzilla sort of mirrors what the humankind is doing, in a way. And that was Godzilla's way of morphing into the next phase, to spring humans from itself to further the attack. Possibly even another Godzilla, like a duplicate Godzilla is what I've heard also. But I'm not sure Reggie probably knows a lot more about that than I do.
Well, of course, it's all speculation at this point until Toho decides to make Shin Godzilla 2. But yeah, I totally buy that Godzilla was realizing that it was the best way to beat humanity was to mimic them, and so he was going to break himself down to a bunch of little Godzilla people and do God knows what.
Question?
Oh yeah.
So there's not really any, or except for Rando and the other scientists, there's really no sympathetic characters. And I didn't think so.
Oh yeah.
I felt like the whole time you're rooting for Godzilla, right? Aren't you?
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. Like, it goes back to the idea of there's an element of self-interest in all these characters' motivations. Even Rando, Kyoko, the closest thing to heroes this movie has, they're very much thinking about how this will affect their careers. And so, yeah, with that, it's hard to not sympathize with Godzilla, especially Godzilla, who we don't really get an idea into what his thought process is, but like the songs are an indication, he just has no idea what's going on. He didn't ask for this life and he just wants out of it. And so in that context, yeah, it's really hard to not feel for Godzilla.
The nerds were, the scientists were the most sympathetic.
Oh yeah.
But they were antisocial, so.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah, go science.
All all of them were kind of pro-science. Every Godzilla that was ever defeated was the scientist that created something that would kill it. The bombs, the actual military was always ineffective, and it speaks to where Japan is as far as the bomb goes. They don't like the military or the bomb solutions, and they like the kind of ground bottom up scientific discovery kind of thing. It's one point to that is when they employed all the attacks at the end. The things that were attacking it were our own mechanisms, and they were shown to be kind of organic. The trains that were bomb trains came and wrapped themselves around like snakes coming up on Godzilla, and also the cranes came in like spiders. They were all kind of attacking the mouth almost like an organism. And that to me was on purpose. I saw that as an organic response rather than the bombs and the military.
Yeah, that's an interesting interpretation. Yeah, I hadn't considered that. I wouldn't be surprised if that was something Otto was going for with his decision to make to render the trains that way. So yeah, it's...
One thing that's consistent is Godzilla loves trains.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The popular joke is after 60 years, the trains finally got back at Godzilla.
A little bit.
This gentleman had a question here.
Oh, right. Now, I was going to mention that going back to the political side of the story, I thought it was pretty funny and interesting how the first half was almost like Dr. Strangelove, very politically like a satire, which was great.
Yeah.
But then once we see that helicopter blow up and the end of that generation of the politicians, right, the old ways and traditions, we see a much more streamlined, serious, like political storyline, which was, I mean, you get those two sides in one movie, and I almost didn't notice it at first until everything like.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, no, it's Doctor Strange was like a perfect comparison. The movie I've found myself comparing it to is In the Loop, and that, I don't know how many of you have seen that, but it's a political, oh yeah, you got it. It's good stuff. It's from the gentleman Armando Iannucci, who did Veep and Death of Stalin. And so that film is about run up to the war in Iraq, basically, and about the efforts of like low-level government functionaries to prevent it. And the tone, there's a lot of running back and forth and like bureaucratic infighting, very much like this film. And funnily enough, I actually dropped it into our last Q&A for the original Godzilla film with Steve and Ed, and it completely went over their heads. They're just like, oh, we never seen that movie. And I'm like, oh, all right, but it's a good one. But yeah, it's much more politically oriented than, although Godzilla has always been political, of course. But like this one, explicitly so.
Yeah, great points, yeah. Yeah, so I think with that, I think we're gonna go ahead and start wrapping it up for tonight. We do want to continue the discussion. Feel free to hang out in the lobby. Thank you for all those good points. And I think that it really makes you think, at least for me. It's not just another popcorn movie when it comes to the Godzilla franchise. And I am very excited for a possible sequel to this, because where they can go with it, it's just imagination, and very interested in that. So I very much thank you guys all for sticking around and hanging out with us and having this discussion. And let's continue it on in the lobby.
Thank you.
Aside from that, again, LA Art Society. So quick plug for us. Feel free to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. It's at LA Arts with an S Society. And that's where you're gonna get a lot of good information as to what we're doing next. We have some pretty cool stuff coming up next.
Oh yes.
That we're working on. So you'll be in the know if you go ahead and follow us. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Go Godzilla!